presentation, you have time to continue to work in your group. We have 5 classrooms. After the presentation, we will announce the numbers of the classrooms, and then we can divide you among the 5 classrooms. Then you have time for lunch in the city, and we come back here in the afternoon. But after the presentation, Professor Tanja Hesse will explain you more about the details of the afternoon program. Now, please give Joep and Niels a big hand.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good morning. So we are Joep and Niels. Together we founded Next Blue. Next Blue is a startup focusing on intercultural storytelling. And before we introduce ourselves a bit more, we will first have a few slides introducing the urgency and the needs of intercultural storytelling. If this one is working. Yeah. So worldwide, almost 20 million people fled disasters in 2015 only.
And did you know that in 2050, climate disasters could cause 1 out of 9 people in the world to flee?
Did you know that 1 out of 4 people in the world don't have access to clean drinking water, to safe drinking water at home? So if you hear these numbers, we will not bore you with more numbers this morning, but if you hear these numbers, you think, well, we're living in a harsh world, right? It's a lot of doom and gloom, isn't it?
But did you know that?
While the number of disasters increased over the last decades, the number of victims decreased because we became much more resilient due to early warning systems, cyclone shelters. This is a cyclone shelter in Bangladesh, for example. So the number of disasters is increasing, but the numbers of victims is decreasing, and not only in the West, also in South Asia, also in Africa.
Worldwide, child mortality reduced by over 50% since 1990.
Yeah, so now I hear you thinking, why don't we hear these positive facts in the news? Because usually when we switch on the television, or when we listen to the radio, if you still do that, I don't know, or if you open your Facebook, you'll probably see a lot of these negative news facts, right? So all these cyclones, floods, storms. Why don't we see the more positive news in the media? The increasing resilience of people, reducing child mortality, more people getting access to safe drinking water and sanitation. Well, we believe, having worked in development and emergency aid projects for a decade together, we believe it has to do with the fact that NGOs want to raise funds, so they like increasing the urgency, they like kind of sketching doom scenarios, and mainstream media, they have a focus on negative news as well, because somehow negative news sells. Now that's why we founded Next Blue, because we believe in the power of a forward-looking positive story. We believe that if we water experts become better at sharing good practices and lessons learned, we can stand on each other's shoulders. And if we can stand on each other's shoulders, we can reach higher. So Next Blue uses intercultural storytelling to link technology and culture. We combine the worlds of the engineers and the do-it-yourselfers. We connect water professionals here in the Netherlands, in Switzerland, in America, with local delta dwellers in developing countries, such as Bangladesh and Vietnam. We use citizen journalism, we use video making apps, citizen journalism, to connect the stories of people that actually face these disasters in their daily lives, to link them and their context, their reality, with what the professionals hear. And we use intercultural storytelling to also exchange knowledge between generations, between what the professionals that have been in the sector for decades, and new young experts like you yourself. That's why we founded Next Blue. Now let us first, before we dive into intercultural storytelling, into examples of why we think it is needed, let us first introduce ourselves. This is Joep Jansen. Joep actually graduated as an architect from the Technical University in Delft. He worked as an urban designer, as an architect in the Netherlands and in Vietnam. And he wrote the book Living with the Mac On. He will tell a bit more about his book later on, but he literally traveled through Vietnam on a small motorcycle to talk with farmers and other people about their lives with water.
And Niels, he is educated as an ecologist at the Wageningen University. And years ago, he went to Bangladesh. He lived there for 5 years. And he is also a green politician. He worked as a politician in the Netherlands. And last year he went back to Bangladesh to work on a water project for UNICEF to coordinate the wash facilities after the flood last year.
Thank you. So, as we said before, storytelling is needed to bridge the gaps between water professionals and local people. Now, I hear you thinking, well, that's an open door, that's logical. Of course, we have to connect the knowledge and the technologies we have here with the reality, the knowledge, the historical knowledge, the experience of people living in those deltas. But it's not that obvious, because we came across many examples where it didn't happen. This is a picture from 1983. This is my friend Andrew Jenkins, who is now an almost retired water professional. Almost retired because he is still doing some projects because of his passion. He can't leave it behind, which is a pleasure for young professionals like me because I'm learning a lot from him. But this is an example of where technology was not linked to the local context, because here you see a windmill. Andrew Jenkins was the leading engineer of a Dutch water management project in Bangladesh in 1983 called the Land Reclamation Project. And at some point, the Dutch embassy said, well, we need to have wind energy driven irrigation, because that back then in the Netherlands was the thing. We needed to use wind energy for irrigation. But actually it was totally useless in Bangladesh, frankly speaking, because the only period when there is a lot of wind in the south of Bangladesh is during the monsoon. Well, during the monsoon there's enough water as well. So actually this is a typical example of a top-down project. Now the funny thing is that the local people, they at first they were very excited, because when the Dutch engineers came to build this windmill, they actually thought that the Dutch engineers came to build a big cooling fan for them. They said, well, it's very nice of those Dutch engineers that they are thinking about us, because yeah, indeed, we feel very hot in summer. It's very hot here, around 35, 40 degrees, so this big cooling fan, it's a great innovation. When it turned out that it was actually meant for irrigation during the monsoon, they got disappointed, of course, because they said we don't need it at all. Well, to make a very long story very short, this windmill-driven irrigation project only lasted for 1 year, with a lot of subsidy, because obviously it wasn't needed. The people didn't know how to maintain the windmill, plus there was no urgency to do so, because they have enough rainwater to irrigate the land when there is wind, and the rest of the year there is no wind, so when they need it, it's not functioning. Interesting enough is that this windmill is still there, it's not being used, but there's a small market around this windmill which they still call Punka Baja, and Punka Baja means something like windmill market. So now you think, okay, that's all well and nice, Niels and Joep, but this is 1983. Okay, let me give you a more recent example then from my own career in development and emergency aid. So just to check whether you are all awake, where do you think this photo was taken? Anyone? Joep already gave you a hint that last year I was in Bangladesh with UNICEF, so where could it be? Bangladesh, yeah, very good. And more specifically in the Rohingya camps. So last year I went with UNICEF on a monitoring visit to the Rohingya camps in Bangladesh. And the reason why I'm showing you this photo is because I came across many examples where technology was not linked with the local reality of Rohingya refugees, and because of time I will only give you 2 examples. First of all, the latrines. So this is a toilet built by DPHC, Department of Public Health Engineering, who I was supporting in Bangladesh. Now if you look at this photo, is there something you miss? What do you think could be missing here?
Translation.
Translation, water, yes. Anything else? Yeah, it's a toilet. It's a toilet. Yeah.
Light.
Sorry?
Light in the dark.
Light, yeah, could be. You think these answers are all correct, and definitely the translation one, because what I actually meant is a sign. I don't see any male-female sign here. I mean, there's a lot of emergency aid guidelines, and for sanitation they say that roughly 2/3 of all the latrines you build should be for women, and 1/3 of all the latrines you build should be for men. The reason of that is that in many cultures women are caregivers for the children as well, plus once a month women have their period, so women need more latrines than men. But in this camp they didn't take this into account. The government just started building latrines, and NGOs did the same, by the way, because there were also latrines like this built by Oxfam. Same thing, no male-female signs. So I was there on a monitoring visit, so I asked the water sanitation and hygiene engineers, I asked them, okay, why have you not built separate latrines for men and women? And then they said, yeah, well, we asked the local refugee population and they said, well, they don't need it. Then I asked them, okay, who did you ask? And it turned out they only asked men. They asked all men, religious leaders, community leaders. So you might think, well, it's obvious to link technology and culture, but in practice it's not that obvious. Another thing is this. They used a lot of plastic materials in the latrines. Which makes sense, because of a lot of these things were shipped in, even by planes and by boats, so it had to be lightweight. But the thing is, the Rohingya people in Myanmar, they are used to latrine parts which are made from concrete. So a lot of these latrines were not being used by the people, because the people thought, well, this is plastic. If we squat on this latrine, it might crack, we might fall into the latrine. So first of all, the people were not asked how they would want the design of the latrine. And secondly, once the latrines were built, there has been no discussion or dialogue about why plastic parts have been used. Okay, after these examples of how not to do it, I will show you an example of how it can be done. Because this is a positive example about rainwater harvesting. So I also worked in a development project in Bangladesh with local people in the northwest, where they face serious water scarcity in around four months a year. So I went in there and I thought, well, we need to do rainwater harvesting. We need to make sure that we can actually capture the rainwater during the monsoon without windmills this time, but just store the water so that it can be used in the dry period. Then these farmers said, well, yeah, it's a nice idea, Niels, but it will not work here because we need this land actually to cultivate food. We need to cultivate food to eat it, we need to cultivate food to sell it. So then jointly we actually developed a model where we would harvest rainwater and at the same time cultivate crops on the embankments. You don't see that on this photo, but also cultivate fish and crab. This is crab. By doing so, the rainwater harvesting pond also generated income for the people.